Welcome, everybody. So great to see you today. We are so excited to be back with the dorm series of roundtables, and especially excited to welcome my friend, Heather Hayes. We're just going to let everybody join and get off their last calls and get started about 3:02. So we'll just give it a minute as everybody logs in. And then John McGeehan, our CEO, is going to take it away. So great to see everybody's faces. Heather and I were just talking about this feels kind of like a conference with all of the names that are on our list today. So I just can't tell you how happy we are to see everyone today. All right, John, what do you think?
We're ready, guys. Ben Mason made it, so we're ready to get started.
Absolutely.
Great to have everybody. Welcome to September. It's hard to believe. We're here and we all made it. We're super excited to have you here for intervention in the family systems during COVID-19. And in particular, welcome our friend Heather Hayes, who owns Heather Hayes and Associates, to join us for the PowerPoint presentation. So thank you for being with us, Heather.
Thank you so much. It's so exciting to see all the faces. I keep looking at all the little squares. So anyway, thanks everybody. It's so good to see all of you. So thanks for coming.
So from the dorm side, we'll have Dr. Amanda Fialk, who's my partner and our Chief of Clinical Services, joining Heather in the PowerPoint presentation. I also wanted to introduce Brittany Becker, who is our clinical supervisor from the New York campus as well, who's joining us. Real quick housekeeping. We'll have about a 40-minute PowerPoint presentation followed by a Q&A. So if any questions arise during the PowerPoint presentation, don't hesitate to put them in the chat box, and we will do our best to get to all of your questions. In the event we don't, we'll be following up with an email with all of the slides, in addition to all of our personal contact details to hopefully keep the conversation going. So don't hesitate to reach out. But with that, I'm gonna ask Meredith to queue up the slides and turn it over to Heather to get started.
There we go. Sounds good. Well, thanks everybody for taking time out today. I'm just excited to be here and excited to talk about the topic. You know, this has been such a weird, unprecedented time where, you know, we're all trying to struggle with how do we help our clients? How do we take care of ourselves? How do we help our families? How do we keep everyone safe during COVID? And so I think we're all still working together to figure out how do we continue to bring the best of the best that we can to the families and their loved ones that we work with. So I want to talk a little bit about family systems and the family system approach because I think it's really important. And so my favorite explanation of what a family system is the one that was developed by Sharon Wakescheider Cruz. And what she did is she talked about family systems and she compared them to those mobiles with the sticks and the strings and the butterflies. And so she looked at the butterflies as our different family members that we have in our family. And the sticks and the strings are like the family rules that we have, sort of our family norms, the things that kind of gel us together as families. And when I say family rules, some are spoken and some are unspoken. Like in my family, I knew who it was worse to get in trouble with, you know, mom or dad. And so like the mobiles, families always seek balance. So when wind comes along, bringing like change, tussles everything up, the families will always go back into some kind of a balance. And what happens when you have addiction or mental health issues or sudden grief and loss in a family, it's like you're coming in and putting a paper clip on one of those family members, one of those butterflies. And families always seek balance. So what happens is other family members end up picking up compensation behaviors to balance things back out again. It's like they put their own paper clip on. And so one of the things, you know, we spent, I think when I first came into the field in the 80s, we really believe that family systems were balanced and organized around our identified patients. This is a slide, the next two slides come from my friend Bill Maher, and I think they really explain well sort of how we looked at family systems. And so part of how we looked at it is we had this identified patient, and I'm just going to use the infamous Uncle Joe because we all have one. So we have this patient, Uncle Joe, and we spend all of our time wondering, is he drinking? Is he not going to drink? Is he gonna, if he doesn't, if he drinks, is he going to throw up on the Thanksgiving table? What's going to happen? So Uncle Joe had all the power in the family, and everyone was anxiously organized around him. Now, the problem with this organization is that if you take Uncle Joe out of this and put him into treatment, the family members are still organized like this. So the loved one goes to treatment, and then they're saying, not yet. Back to the other slide for 1 second, please. So the Uncle Joe goes to treatment, and the family members are saying, oh, I don't know if this is the right treatment center. They don't feel any relief. I didn't get my phone call in time. Are you sure we made the right, choice? What's going to happen when he gets back? He gets back, and again, everyone's focused in on Uncle Joe. Is he drinking? Is he tired? Let me sniff him. So the reason why I think we believe that families were organized like this is because this is what it feels like to be in a family with alcoholism or mental health issues. Okay, now the next slide. Thank you. So what we know is, even though that's what it feels like, this is what it really looks like. What we have in the center is not Uncle Joe. We have a lot of different things. We have mental health issues. We have alcoholism, drug addiction, eating disorders, sudden grief and loss. And you can see the arrows are what are facing out. It's these issues. And sometimes families come to us and they don't know what's wrong. There's a big question mark there. But they come to us and say something's wrong with Uncle Joe. We don't know. But it's these issues that are affecting everyone in the family system. And often if we do a genogram, we'll see that they've been affected for generations. This didn't just happen in a vacuum. And so from this model, we take the focus off of our identified patient and put it onto the entire family system so that everyone in the family system, because they've been impacted, because they've had their paper clip on, by these issues, everyone needs to do the work and everyone has an opportunity to begin to heal. Okay, next slide, thank you. So when we talk about working from a family system approach, what is it that we really want for our clients? We want long-term, substantial recovery. We want sustainable health. We want to have the opportunity for everyone in the family to begin to look at their own issues and begin to rewrite their family script. We want everyone in the family to look at sort of the generational impact of what has happened to them and how it's been recorded and how they can begin to change that story or that family line. We really want our families and our loved ones to thrive. We want them to find that purpose in life. We want them to give meaning, find that meaning, and to really be able to thrive in a world where there is a lot of pain, where it is very difficult. And if you look at and read, and I highly recommend looking at it, reading, the work by our brilliant, family therapists out there and others in our industry, like Salvador Minuchin, Jay Haley and Chloe Madonis, Carl Whitaker, Murray Brown, who taught, and Monica McGoldrick, who talks so much about the generational piece, Judith Landau, Claudia Black, just to name a few. You'll see throughout the literature, all the research shows how important it is for the entire family to be involved in the healing and to begin to shift the focus off of that identified patient and really begin to look more holistically at the families. So when we talk about others' paper clips, like what is it that happens to family members when you grow up in a family where there's maybe been generations of trauma or grief and loss or alcoholism or mental health issues. There are a lot of different things that happen. Your family members don't get their developmental needs met properly. It can impair attachment. The rules of the family can become very harsh. It can be like, don't talk about problems, don't express anger, you're only allowed to express anger. There's sort of a rigidity. And families have a hard time shifting out of that. Communication can become triangulated where people aren't speaking to each other. And you'll have families that have family members that have ended up with, again, legal problems, economic hardships, or we even have families that are born into, ultra high net worth and have the issues that come along with that. So there are a lot of different factors with families that you have to take into account of how they've been impacted over the years. So when we look at that, again, we want to continue to look at within the family, how are feelings expressed? What is it okay to talk about? How do they deal with problems? How do they deal with conflict? Is the system closed off so that there's not the ability to let the outside world in to give help and support? And some of the ways that plays out, I'm Southern. So one of our kind of family Southern rules is that you don't air your dirty laundry out in public. Again, that's saying everything stays within the home. If it's not pretty, don't talk about it. So when you have a family system that's closed off and has a difficult time talking about things not looking good, we often find that it's hard for families to get help, ask for help, and to receive help. Okay, next. So one of the things I think it's so important for us to remember above and beyond anything is that family systems are resilient. They are full of strengths. That generationally we have families that have dealt with the most horrific, again, tragedies, loss, mental health issues. And yet here they are sitting in front of us, running companies, bringing their loved ones for help. Families are the most important and motivating asset that we have when we're trying to help people get on the road for healing, because families have been there for the long haul and they're going to be there for generations to come. We really just step in as kind of a quick blip on the radar. So it's important for us to really think about and not pathologize our family, but families to really look at what are the strengths that they're bringing to the table, because they come to us, having made it here for generations with those strengths. So when it comes to I think there are a few things that make it difficult. When we talk about family systems I don't know if you guys can see my hands because I can only see the screen, so I hope you can. But when we talk about families, families come together, they get sort of the homeostasis. It's like they're together in a way that is familiar. It may not work well at times. It may be difficult. But when you have to literally come in and kind of deconstruct the family, the way they interact, so that they can come back together and interact and relate and reconstruct in a way that's healthier. And in doing that, there's a period of time where there's actually the old familiar way pulls people back. And so it's scary, it's difficult. And there are other things that I think come into play when it comes to trying to help families really engage and get involved in treatment. It can be hard. And part of that is because parents don't want to believe it. Parents don't want to believe that their children have mental health issues or addiction issues, possibly because, it's so scary, and maybe they've already had it in generations above. It's so painful to think about here, having it again, or that their loved one's going to have to go through what they're going to go through. Often parents don't understand what it is that we're talking about. We see this a lot when we talk about things like gaming addictions or eating disorders or cutting. There's some things that some families just don't understand. And if you don't understand something, then it's hard to know how to talk about it. So for example, it's hard enough for parents to talk to their children about sex, much less to talk to their 11-year-olds about not sending, selfies of themselves with no clothes on. Those are hard conversations. So the other thing is that often, our statistics say that for every child, 1 in 4 of every children have a family member who has addiction or mental health issues. So often that gets in the way too, that parents have a hard time seeing it or admitting it or wanting to do the work because they have it themselves. And lastly, I think it's that shame and stigma that can really come and get in the way as well. So for example, Um, you know, for example, I think that no matter how hard we work, no matter how much we try in the beginning to help parents understand that addiction, is a brain disorder, that mental health issues are a brain disorder, stigma comes into play, and parents ultimately take a lot of work to get beyond feeling like somehow it's their fault and they've been bad parents. Okay. So what do we do? How do we help correct this? Well, we want to really come in and work to motivate the family system to get them engaged in treatment while being trauma responsive, by being aware, by being understanding. Again, there are family members that will come to me and literally have their head hung in their hands, and they would have rather been called a 4-letter word than to be told they were an enabler. I think in a lot of ways of our trying to educate through the years, we have taken terms like enabling and made them something that we've in our field beat parents over the head with. We've got to stop pathologizing our families. We've got to help them understand that the things that they do as loving, normal human beings with hearts backfire because addiction doesn't play by the right rules. Mental health issues don't respond the way we're normally drawn to do. And educate them around the dynamics of what happens with mental health issues. Help them understand there's power in knowledge. Help them understand, again, from an psychoeducational part about substance abuse and the generational dynamics that take place. And we can talk about even the languaging we use. Like, for example, so you can say someone's in denial, but if you look at denial, what is the energy behind denial? Denial is fierce protection. None of us want our loved ones to be in pain. So we step in and do whatever we can do to get them out of pain. The problem is that with addiction, the fiercer way to protect our loved ones is often taking us out of our own comfort zones. So help work with parents around doing that. Help parents look at, instead of saying enabling or things that have kind of become bad words, to talk about, again, how do we help support health and not contribute to demise? And look at the behaviors and the way you're interacting with your loved one and kind of run it through that decision tree. There's also what I call the paradigm shift, which is, the way we do mental health and substance abuse treatment is very different than what our parents are used to when it comes to medical treatment and someone going to the hospital. If we have a child who's sick or an automobile accident, families will go and they will sit vigil in the ICU waiting room. No one will leave. Every time someone walks by, they're begging for questions, for answers. Is my child okay? Have you heard anything? And then we send their children off for treatment and we say, okay, now you can't talk to your kid for a week, or they're going to be out in the wilderness and you can have a letter. And, and again, our families get anxious. They don't understand. It's our responsibility to help explain to them the difference and why and get them ready for this, rather than to say, wow, this parent is so controlling and they keep calling every 5 minutes to see if little Billy has his hoodie. So I have an article that we're going to put out with the rest of the stuff that talks in more depth about that and explaining it to families. But again, one of the things that I found too is that, the things that we can expect, the younger the client or the more profound the mental illness, the more needs the family have, the more anxious they are. So again, we need to also come in and help support our families, because having a mental health issue in your family or addiction is stressful. The family members have PTSD and they get worn out and exhausted. So we have to come in and help, again, address their chronic wear and tear, and come in and help create protective families for the individuals and the family systems that help bring support and safety to them. And so again, how is this exacerbated during the pandemic? Well, isolation, everyone's isolated. So we have family members, we have loved ones who perhaps are on medical assisted, no matter what you think about methadone or Suboxone or what your opinions are, we have people who are on those medications that haven't been able to have access to them. They haven't had access to clean needles. They haven't had access to Narcan. We have family members with mental health issues whose mental health issues, again, are exacerbated by the anxiety, by all of the fear out in the world. You know, again, we're also seeing where, you know, we've got more stress on all the family members, medical, emotional, financial stress. And again, we're seeing an increase in domestic violence. You know, people are at home. They, you know, and again, our children haven't been going to school, so they're not able to get, you know, what they, you know, they're not there, they're not away from home, which again, there haven't been higher reports of child abuse, but with an understanding that if domestic violence is up, child abuse is probably up too, and now they're not at school where the teachers and others can make those reports. And our family members are more exposed to their loved ones' behavior, so they're seeing it more. They're able to really become more aware of a young one's addiction or their OCD or other behaviors. And then we could do a whole nother talk just about how traumatic it is with all the anxiety and everything that our children see, you know, just through the media. So there's a lot of scary, scary things out there that they're seeing just on the internet or on TV. So what we want to do is we want to come in and really help, again, build up our family's self-confidence, talk to them about their strengths, and then come in and add resources. You know, move the focus off of the identified patient and onto the entire family system so that we can begin to create safety for those that heal. And again, bringing in protective factors. And everything I'm talking about, the protective factors here with mental health, with addiction, also ring true with trauma. And so a lot of this that I'm talking about now, you know, comes from the work of Figley and Kesey. Figley is at Tulane. Kesey is in University of Maryland. They've done a lot of work, but they talk about, again, we need to bring in and help with motivation to change, help families to bring in extra support from friends, family members, from counselors, help them to look at, you know, again, other things that help keep them safe, whether it's the legal system, employers, you know, families and all of that. But again, helping our families to get to a place where they can begin to heal in a safe environment. All right, I think this is my last slide. So what have we done differently? So there've been several things. We've been actually quite busy. And part of what we've done, you know, first and foremost, we followed all of the CDC COVID-19 protocols. So we have been, you know, again, when, you know, we have masks for clients, we sit 6 feet apart. A lot of my transporters will regularly get COVID tested. We've done a good number of interventions on Zoom, and that could either be the whole intervention on Zoom. We've done I actually did one intervention where we did it actually on the phone, but we had a transport person there waiting to help the person get the treatment. We've just tried to be creative. If there's even a hint that someone is at high risk and we're coming together to do the intervention, they don't come, they come in on Zoom. Or if it's a chaotic intervention where it's difficult to have someone sit down, which happens a lot with mental health interventions, to sit and look at a camera for Zoom, we may have the loved ones videotape their message to them, and we're able to show that to them at a certain time. We've also found that, you know, we do a lot of case management. We work with our families for 6 months, and I've found that we've done a lot more case management where we're working with the families and then doing some of the work we would have done in the back end, and then stepping in and doing an intervention, or not even needing an intervention because the family's done the work and their loved one goes to treatment. And then lastly, the other thing that we've tried to do, because so many of the family programs have been halted because of the pandemic, we've also tried to come in and do extra work, knowing that our families at week 3 or 4 may not be getting a week-long, you know, family educational component or family counseling through the treatment center. So we've come in and done not only family intensives with the families while their loved ones were in treatment, but also work to put together more of a curriculum where we're able to address a lot of the educational issues, educational pieces that families would have gotten at the treatment center. So thank you.
Thanks so much for all that information. My name's Amanda. I am going to be talking a little bit about the dorm and about our philosophies around treating young adults and the family system. You know, we do treat young adults. So, of course, the first thing that our 18 plus clients remind us of when they walk in the door is that they are adults and that they're over 18, and that their families should not have anything to do with the treatment, and they're not signing releases, et cetera, et cetera. We remind them very gently that our philosophy is actually that we cannot treat a young adult without looking at and including the entire family system. They are over 18 and legally an adult, but in basically every way, shape, and form, very much dependent on their parents and still functioning very much like children and like adolescents. We believe that everyone in the family system is playing a role in maintaining the symptoms of the identified patient. And that's also a way to sort of engage the young person, letting them know that we include the family because it's not just their fault. It's not just their problem. We need to help their parents, and their parents need to do work in this process as well. So we take a very systemic and structural approach to treating the family, looking at things like boundaries and communication patterns, systems and subsystems within the system, feedback loops, the norms and rules and roles that Heather was speaking about. I love the mobile example and, you know, the wind blowing, and coronavirus has certainly given us a big gust of wind when it comes to treating families during this time. And we're also really mindful about intergenerational family dynamics and how things get passed on and traumas get passed on between generations of family members. So it's very important that we look at and include the family right from day one. So during the assessment process, we interview all family members, and this includes siblings too, and really gather all relevant clinical information and details around family dynamics, family histories, history of substance use, history of mental illness. The siblings have actually been such a wealth of information for us. They really give us a different perspective sometimes than what the parents' perspective is. And then, of course, we also collaborate with all existing treatment teams and providers and referral sources for continuity of care, and also just to gather more information. There's no such thing as too much information when it comes to the family unit or the individual that we're specifically treating here. At the dorm, we also involve parents throughout the entire process. So we have on a weekly basis a parent group, which is a therapeutic group that parents attend without their children. What's wonderful about Zoom is that there's no excuse that you can't get here. So attendance rates have actually been better during coronavirus with the families because they can't use some of the excuses that they used to use. We do individual family therapy. We do parent coaching, and I call it coaching, but the work is actually done by a licensed clinician. We're really trying to give them a set of skills to use in communicating and setting boundaries with their young adult child. We have multi-family group that meets once a week, and then we have twice a month parent only workshops. In addition, and this launched during coronavirus, and we're going to keep it going, we have a sibling group. We have so many siblings who really need to heal as well and want to be a part of the process. They're in that group with other siblings of the identified patients, and it's a safe place for them to process what it's like to be the sibling of somebody who's getting a whole lot of attention in the family because they have problems. Here just is a really brief description. I'm not gonna go through all of this because you guys will be getting the slides after, and I want to be mindful of leaving enough time at the end for questions, but these are basically descriptions of what I just talked about in terms of the parent therapy group, the family therapy individually, multifamily group, parent workshops that take place. We call them parent collectives. They're hosted by 2 licensed clinicians, and they're very topic specific. And then again, the sibling group that takes place. Getting the family's buy-in is so important. People ask me all the time on initial phone calls, what are some examples of clients that you don't take at the dorm? What are exclusionary sort of criteria? And from a clinical perspective, there's really not much actually that we can't handle. However, if a family does not want to be involved in the process or refuses to be involved in the process, we don't believe that this is the right treatment program for them, because we so firmly believe that in order for the young adult to heal, the family really must do some changing as well. COVID-19, that has certainly given us all a run for our money in terms of trying to get really creative with maintaining the highest level of clinical care that we possibly can and that our clients need and deserve. So some of our clients at this point in time, I should say, we're really doing hybrid treatment where we're open certain Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays for in-person treatment. Tuesdays and Thursdays we're virtual. That said, we do have some clients who have continued to shelter in place and are still doing 100% virtual treatment. We have noticed, like I said earlier, that with the parents, their attendance is so much better in a virtual setting, which I think we're all going to have to think about moving forward once coronavirus has become part of history and isn't with us currently, how we might want to restructure some of the family work that we do, especially parent groups and parent collectives, because attendance is so important and consistency of attendance is so important, and the more barriers that we can remove to them attending, the better. So it's something that we're going to certainly be looking at, and maybe offering at least 2 options where we have a virtual parent group and an in-person parent group, so that way nobody can say that something doesn't work for them. There's an option for whatever suits your needs, and you have to be there. We've also increased the amount of parent coaching that we're doing. Typically, we do parent coaching once a week. So for an hour a week, every parent gets their own session. The first 10 minutes of the session are spent really giving them an update about how their young adult child is doing. And then 50 minutes are spent talking about the parents and challenging the parents to look at themselves and the changes that they need to make. We've found that during this time, as many of our clients have been moving home, spending months at home, sheltering in place with families, that we've needed to increase the amount of parent coaching that they're doing, just because they're falling into old patterns that are really not congruent with the recovery process and that are, if anything, hindering the recovering process. So for some families, they're needing coaching multiple times a week just to hold themselves accountable to maintaining the same systems that we've always asked them to have in place. We launched the Parent Collective during coronavirus, which we are going to maintain, which is the bi-weekly series that are very topic specific, and then the sibling group, which we're going to continue. So I guess the moral of the story is that sometimes out of crises, there are silver linings, and that it's forced us to get creative in certain treatment programming, and these are things that we can now take with us because they work. Just wanted to give some examples of what the parent collective conversations can look like. So one was called Let's Get Interpersonal, Effectiveness in Our Relationships. So many of our clients learn DBT skills. So many of our parents have not learned DBT skills. This was an opportunity to teach them some interpersonal effectiveness skills and learn communication strategies outlined in DBT. So really they can begin to speak the same language as their child who is learning these skills is now speaking. There's nothing more frustrating than trying to have a conversation with somebody who doesn't speak the same language as you. And oftentimes the parents and the kids are not. unpacking our emotions, responding versus reacting. So really understanding the differences between reacting and responding to emotions and how this influences the way that we communicate, our relationship patterns, and then developing strategies to change our reactivity. We do this with our clients. Again, we want to teach our parents the same thing. Another example is navigating grief in today's uncertain world, COVID-19. So looking at grief, we've all lost a lot during this time. A life that we once knew is now completely different, and we're working towards a new normal and really helping to empower our families to discuss strategies for having conversations with their young adult children around this shared experience. This is something they have in common. This is an opportunity for families to get closer as they are grieving together. Failure to launch. These are our clients. These are our young adult clients. They're stuck. They're very stuck. Regardless of what they're diagnosed with, their symptoms have impeded their ability to launch. And this has been amplified and exacerbated and made much more complicated by the wind gust, if we want to keep with that metaphor, that COVID-19 has sort of blown onto the mobile that before was operating in a homeostasis and now has to readjust. What we know is that any major societal event can impact social development of the individual and of the family as well. So even normal transitions like moving out, going to school, starting a career, all of these things have been really disrupted by COVID-19. And this is causing the family system to morph and to change. Children who were supposed to be leaving the house are now staying at home. And problematic family dynamics are being exacerbated because everybody is under stress. So we really want to teach our parents how to be careful not to hinder natural and normal development, even though their children are living at home with them due to coronavirus. And what we want to try to do is find a balance. Support, validation, empowering our young people is important. However, those nasty words that Heather said that parents don't like to hear, codependency, enabling is also something that we want to be mindful of. We tell our parents that we don't want them to parent too much, which is like the antithesis of what a parent wants to do. The natural instinct is to protect and to create this safe, sheltered life. And I think the urge is even stronger when your young adult child is struggling with mental illness or addiction. But we need to help parents to help their young adult without hindering their natural progression towards autonomy and self-efficacy. So for the validate and check in and be empathic part, I think that's actually, well, it's easier for some of our parents, not all, but check in with your young adult. Check in frequently, especially during coronavirus. Listen to their concerns, validate their concerns. Their concerns are valid and their frustrations are understandable. Their frustrations in some ways are very similar to the frustrations of the parent. The goal is not to eliminate their anxiety. The goal is to normalize it and empower them to use skills to make it feel a little bit more tolerable. For the don't enable, and we say don't parent too much, that's our way of working around enabling and codependency. What we tell our parents is, listen, most of the young adults that we work with can learn to and should learn to and need to learn to in order to launch, do things like their laundry, cook their own meals, stick to a budget, clean their own spaces, get up on their own or set an alarm clock to get up on their own, stick to routine, make their own doctor's appointments, go to their own doctor's appointments to get on their own, do their schoolwork. And even though your child might be because of coronavirus living at home with you, that does not mean that they should not be doing all of these things on their own. You are not their alarm clock. You are not responsible for their laundry. You do not have to cook all their meals. If they were at college or working or on their own right now, they would be navigating and sometimes failing at doing some of these things, but failure provides opportunity to learn. Natural consequences provide opportunity to learn. And if you do these things for them, you rob them of those opportunities to learn. We ask parents to model behaviors, especially when they're living under the same roof as them. We know that young adults listen not only to our words, they listen to our actions, probably actually listen more to our actions than our words. So we can demonstrate that it's normal to feel anxious and stressed out during this time. And then we can model that when we feel this way, we utilize tools and skills like deep breathing or meditation. We can model good sleep. We can model exercise and nutrition. We can even do self-care activities together as a family. You can go to the park and do yoga together, take walks together. We tell parents, model safe and responsible ways to have fun and to socialize. Socialize and have fun separate from your children. You have your social life, they have their social life. And show them how to do this. Show them that that separation is healthy. We are trying to tell parents that even though your children are with you during a pandemic, you still have to live your own life to its fullest and find your own passions and find your own hobbies and find your own interests, because that will free space for your child, who is a young adult, to do the same for themselves. With that, I am going to turn everything over to John, who is going to manage the Q&A portion of this.
Thank you so much, Amanda, and thank you, Heather, for a very thoughtful and informative presentation. We wanted to take the next 10 or 15 minutes or so and open it up certainly for any questions, but also some conversation points. I think COVID, the return home, if you will, which I feel like this could have also been called today, you know, has really sparked not only all sorts of family dynamics and return to certain family dynamics, but opportunities as it related to working with the family collectively that hadn't really been done before. So that may also be an opportunity for points of discussion. So with that, I'll turn it all over to you. Feel free to unmute yourself and speak up.
Hi, my name is Carolyn Wolf. I'm a mental health attorney, and I've had clients come to your program, which I think is great. I work a lot with case managers, Brad Richards, I'm sure you know. In any case, the presentation was great. My question is, I have a case now where, and I advise and consult with families mostly is my niche. The dad is in California and his daughter is at least temporarily in New York. Is that something that you folks can manage? I love your parent coaching, the parent piece of that, which, you know, if we could get parents, certainly from my practice, in there 8 hours a day for 7 days, that would be great. But is that something that your program can manage?
Absolutely. So just Carolyn, it's a pleasure to meet you, and thank you for joining us today. Is your question, can you manage a young woman who's living in New York, whose parents?
And the parents, right, are in California.
Yes, certainly.
Okay.
We'd be happy to chat with you offline. And generally what we do is we'll work with Heather Hayes's group in particular. I know Mike has joined the call today from her team to help support families where there's some resistance to entering into a program, you know, sort of to set the stage for the intervention, to really provide that psychoeducation. So to Amanda's point about families that arrive that are looking to sort of leave their child for us to fix them, Heather really helps them understand their role in the recovery process. And we find when families are coming through interventions, they're much better prepared to really join in to the treatment process.
And then my sort of sub part B of the question is, do you ever work with just families whose adult children are resistant to treatment, but kind of backdoor, family, and then hopefully eventually engage with the young adult? Because I have some of those too.
That's been a big part. I mean, it's been interesting. So I am an interventionist. I do a lot of interventions. We do a lot of family work with our families. And so traditionally, we've gone in and worked, again, sometimes, a couple of weeks to a month with the family, sometimes 2 days with the family to get them ready for the intervention. And what we're finding now is with the pandemic, we're doing more, I think, working with the families, we're still doing probably 70% going in and doing the interventions and then continuing working with the families. But about 30% have been us working with the families, helping to get them strengthened in a better place, work on maybe, I have a case right now where we're going to come together, and the parents of this child have so many couples issues. They're still together, but they've got to work some of that out before they can even come together to do an intervention. So we're doing that work with them first. So I think the biggest thing I've learned too about this time is how important it is to just keep thinking outside the box.
Mm-hmm. True. Thank you. That's great. It's really helpful.
Thanks, Carolyn.
So I have a question. I'm David from MAR in Atlanta, and I liked how both of you talked about, the family dynamics, but especially the way you said it, Heather, how addiction and mental health issues don't actually behave by the same rules. And so a family feels like they're loving, but they're really harming instead. But how do, either one of you can answer, can you expand on how to teach the family that for their efforts?
Say that last part. You cut out. How do you?
Yeah, sorry, I'm driving in the middle of South Carolina.
I'm pretty sure you're not driving.
I'm not driving. I'm riding. But how do you teach your family that, and at the same time not shame them?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I think that's the balance. So first off, shout out to our alumni. But I think that the true balance is to really come in and try through education. But we all know that, there's a therapist in Atlanta named Jim Frost that I've known him for almost 35 years now. And we worked on a lot of cases together, and we'd have a perfect plan for the family, and then they'd go get the kid out of jail, or again, the continued enabling. And I just, over the years, watching him just say, sometimes you just have to hit reset. You can't beat someone over the head, just try and come in and say, let's look at what's going on underneath this. What are your fears? What are your anxieties? How do we educate you about it? And not, getting exacerbated or thinking that we can say things like, you're going to kill your kid. I mean, I think that's an awful thing that gets said in our industry. I mean, I would never put that on a parent, So, but there are times and places where it gets said. So I think coming from a place of compassion and really looking at, like, our family members have post-traumatic stress disorder from watching their loved ones slowly die over time. And it's really easy to go back to those old familiar coping mechanisms while you're trying to learn new ones.
Thank you.
Yeah, ditto there's nothing that I could say that Heather didn't just say. I think that it's a dance, and it's striking that delicate balance. You always giving feedback and giving difficult feedback to hear. It's not going to be accepted unless you have a relationship unless you have their trust, unless they feel like you respect them. And I think it's important to always validate how hard it is to be the parent of somebody who's struggling with an addiction or mental illness, and that we know that everybody is doing the best that they can. And that's a principle of DBT, that we're all doing the best that we can, and we can also do a little better, and that's okay. So always sort of prefacing that so that they don't feel shamed.
Thank you, David, for your question.
This is David Cunningham with Augustine Recovery. Heather, thank you. Really good to see some new faces and some old friends on here. That not shaming the families and the parents is huge. I just had that last night with a mom that just broke down and was finally revealed to me for the first time that she was trying to get her son to treatment, and he was in withdrawals, and she actually took him to an area to get him some drugs. She thought he was going to die. I mean, these families, they don't have the skills we've got. That she had, that was the only resort she thought she had. And, you know, I was able to tell her back when I first started in this a long time ago, you know, I remember taking some people to treatment, and, you know, were withdrawing in my vehicle on the way to treatment, and we had a good ways to go, and I would call the detox doctor, and he'd say, don't buy it for them, but stop at the liquor store. You know, they're in a bad way. And, you know, it gave her some relief. You know, I was like, you didn't know what else to do. So that was huge. And so thanks for bringing that up.
Thank you. I know in the same way that addiction like throws us off of our own, if you're addicted, like you know, I'm in recovery. So there were many times I was thrown off of my moral compass. Like I did things that weren't true to myself and my core beliefs when I was using. And the same thing happens to family members too. Like their brain chemistry becomes impaired. And if you had asked that mother 2 years ago, would you buy your son drugs? She would have been, you know, like, are you kidding? Like, you know, offended, no way. And yet that's part of the progression and part of parents doing the best they can with what they've got in that any given moment.
Absolutely.
That's why I think it's up to us to continue to educate the communities to help them know and understand the dynamics of mental health issues and addiction, so that people don't feel like it's a disgrace. Our children don't think it's a disgrace to have a mental health issue or addiction, and can ask for help and ask for help for their friends.
Thank you, David, for that. And thank you, Heather. I just wanted to move to the chat box here from Sunshine. Love that name, Potts. I've noticed that since COVID-19, there are some treatment programs that are not doing family programs due to COVID. I totally understand that the whole family needs treatment, and isn't it a substitute for 12-step recovery for the family? What can I suggest to people who have a loved one in treatment that isn't getting a family program?
Do you want to answer, Amanda? Or do you want me to? Either way.
You can go ahead. I'll follow up after.
Okay. So I think that, you know, again, it is hard right now because families aren't getting family programs. They can still get the support. It's online, which is a little different from Al-Anon or Families Anonymous. But I think to really just help families, you know, again, there are free workshops out there that you can find online that certain that places are doing virtually. There are a lot of good books out there. There are good DVDs. I mean, I think anything that, you know, families can do to continue to educate themselves and get that part of it. And then there are also, you know, counselors and therapists that they can go to, you know, to also get that as well. So, but it is hard right now. It's really hard. Part of what we've been trying to do is fill that gap. And I learned early on, if I say to a family, here's a great book, read it. And then I meet with them the next week and I go, how was that book? They're going, we didn't read the book. So there's a lot on everybody's plate. So, you know, it's up to me to say, okay, that was unrealistic of me. So now let's bring a little more of the information to the family piece by piece.
Yeah, the Zoom Families Anonymous meetings, Al-Anon meetings, they're not the same as being able to participate in person. But I think that it's important to make the most of the resources that are available. And thank goodness we have technology, and that provides us with the capacity to connect to other families, with treatment providers. Families can certainly be doing work on their own while their young adult child is in work, with their own individual providers. If they don't have an individual therapist, get an individual therapist. So there are certainly things that they can do.
So with that, we're going to come to a close, and I'd certainly encourage you all to keep the conversation. We'll be following up with an email with all slides as well. For those of you who would like to stay on, I'd like to take a moment of silence for a dear friend and colleague of, I think, many of ours, Don Vardell, who we lost earlier this week. He was the head of Mountain Valley, which is a wonderful program in the Northeast. So those of you that would like to hold a minute of space here for him and his family to be in our thoughts of prayers, we're going to go ahead and take a minute now to do that. Thank you, guys. I think he heard and felt every one of us. Thank you all for this time. Heather, thank you for joining us. Mike as well. Amanda, this was wonderful. We look forward to seeing you again next week. We'll be here, same place, same time. And keep a lookout for an email with these slides. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Great, thank you. Great program.